Welcome back to Before the Lights podcast. I'm Tommy Canale. The show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment have made their mark. Please go to the web, beforethelightspod.com, and follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod. Do me a favor, everyone. Please subscribe to the show and share it, as that'll help us out a lot. It's time to get this thing off the ground. Go get a coffee, or, depending on what time of day it is, I guess that doesn't matter. Grab a drink. Tell your family, friends, neighbors, and strangers it's time to have an in-depth conversation with our guest. And today, I am joined by a member of the 2005 World Series champion Chicago White Sox, a native of Portland, Oregon, and Glendora, California. He has played 14 years as a professional and 11 years in the majors, made his debut on June 16, 2001, and won a Gold Glove in 2007. Finished with a career batting average of .237, an OPS of .765, and a slugging percentage of .435. Please welcome Aaron Rowand. Aaron, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Privilege for me as a kid and a guy that grown up in Central Illinois and a fourth-generation White Sox fan to talk to somebody that played for that team and won a World Series with them after all those years. So this is a thrill for me as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to start here, Aaron. You played slow pitch softball at 10 years old with your father in adult league. How did that all happen?
Well, my dad played slow pitch softball, and I was in little league at that time, and I used to always go with him to his games. And on occasion, when they wouldn't have enough players to field the team, because some of the guys, didn't show up or whatever, instead of forfeiting, they would just play against the other team anyway, and I would pick up the slack and go out there and play with my dad and all of his buddies against, the other adults on the other team. Everybody signs up to play. Nobody wants to show up and go home. So it was a fun opportunity to go out there and do something a little different than just baseball.
I'll bet. It had to be a good time for you and a bonding session with your father as well.
Absolutely.
Going into youth baseball, in the majors, you basically were an outfielder, but what positions did you start out with in youth baseball?
Well, the first year I ever played, I was 8, and I played first base. But after that year, pretty much played shortstop, pitcher, and catcher all the way up until high school.
And at that time, as a young kid, what big leaguers did you look up to, and were those that you were your mentors, or so to speak?
I looked up to guys like Wally Joyner and Mark McGuire, Reggie Jackson, Jack Clark, Ozzie Smith. I was on the Cardinals as my 10, 11, and 12-year-old years in Little League. So I followed the Cardinals quite a bit. So Ozzie Smith, Jack Clark, Tom Bernansky, all those guys, Willie McGee. I enjoyed watching those guys too. But, a lot of the Dodgers at home down in Southern California also. Mike Scioscia, Steve Sachs, Pedro Guerrero. I enjoyed going. I enjoyed going to both Angels and Dodgers games. Back
up here, but once you became a pro, actually have a chance to meet some of those people and then pick their brains a little bit.
Oh yeah, I've with the exception of Tom Bernansky and Jack Clark, I've met all those other guys that I named.
That's awesome. You attended Glendora High School. You were drafted in 1995 by the New York Mets in the 40th round and decided to attend Cal State Fullerton. What were your thoughts, first off, about being drafted for the first time by the Mets in high school?
Well, it was an honor, obviously. Every kid's dream is to be able to play professional baseball. I mean, everybody wants to be a big leaguer, but you got to take it step by step. And I had a full ride to Cal State Fullerton and kind of just weighed my options as far as where I was drafted, how much money they were offering as opposed to getting an education. And I was a draft and follow, actually, because from what I understood in the moment was I was supposed to be a top 3 round pick. But as all the scouts came into the house and talked with my parents and myself and everything, I think everybody kind of realized that I wanted to go to college. So a lot of the teams didn't want to take a chance on drafting me and then me not signing and going to college. So I fell down to late in the draft. And then I played summer ball that year, and at the end of the summer, they came back and offered me a lot more than what a 39th round pick would get, but it still wasn't enough to dissuade me from going to college, so I ended up going.
You go to Fullerton from 96 to 98. What did you enhance there being at Fullerton? And you also played in the Cape Cod League with the Brewster Whitecaps and were a 1998 All-American. What did you learn more from being at Fullerton before you got drafted again by the White Sox?
Oh, everything. I was lucky to be able to do what I did in high school and broke records and hit a lot of home runs and had a lot of RBIs and hits and everything else. When you go out of high school, you feel invincible. You feel like you got the whole game figured out. And I went to Cal State Fullerton, and the coaching staff there, that's unbelievable, really made me feel dumb, like I didn't know a thing about the game because it's so detailed at that level and at that program, especially at the time, that a lot of the stuff that I felt I had a grasp on, I really didn't, whether it be base running, techniques, fielding, hitting, facing much better pitching than you face in high school. And then obviously transitioning, I wasn't going to be a shortstop. I played shortstop in high school, but I wasn't going to be a shortstop at the higher levels. So they moved me to third base as a freshman. And unfortunately, or fortunately for me, we had a third baseman. They had won the national championship the year before in 95. And the third baseman that had come back that started at third base on the championship team the year before was a senior. So my chances of getting a whole lot of playing time as a freshman were not going to be all that great. And about halfway through the fall, they moved me to the outfield, and I stayed in the outfield for the rest of my career.
How was the transition from going to Fullerton to playing with the Brewster Whitecaps in the Cape Cod League, which, if you're not a baseball fan, is one of the top summer leagues you can get your hands into, if not the top league? What else did that help you with?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have an unbelievable coach there who actually used to coach at Cal State Fullerton. At the time, was the assistant coach at Oklahoma. His name was Bill Mosiello. And Mo was one of the toughest coaches I ever played for and was tougher on me than probably most of the guys on the team. And looking back and talking with him, I still am in contact with him. And he'll say the same thing. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. So he was much harder on me, but he made me work for everything. And he made me a tougher player and pushed me to be the best player I could be. And luckily enough, I got to play for him for 2 seasons there, one after my freshman year and then one after my sophomore year. But obviously, going from an aluminum bat to a wood bat in the Cape Cod League for the first time was an adjustment. And seeing the level of pitching, it still is, but at that time, the Cape Cod League was the best league in college baseball for the summer. Alaska was great too, but at the time they swung aluminum bats, and the Cape you had to swing wood. So facing elite pitching from all the top colleges around the country and having to adjust to the wood bat was a learning experience and helped me really learn how to hit with my hands as opposed to my body. Because swinging a wood bat, you have to learn how to hit with your hands and not so much your shoulders and get your body involved. And that's where today's game, I think, has changed a little bit, or quite a bit actually in youth baseball, because there's so many more used wood bat tournaments. A lot of kids are swinging wood bats at a much younger age than in my generation.
I would agree with that as well. And that's definitely something that I think could be even more growing. I think we could see more wood bat leagues coming even at a younger age if it continues to grow how it has.
Absolutely.
You're drafted in 1998 by the Chicago White Sox in the first round, the 35th pick, and we're with them from 2001 to 2005. Started in 98 at A-ball. How was the transition from Fullerton to A-ball?
Well, I would say, and not to dissuade any youth that are listening, but I would say the biggest transition for me, because I had played in the Cape Cod League for 2 years and swung wood and practiced with it after that, even in college, the wood bat part of it wasn't so much a transition, but the concept of team was a difficult transition because in high school and in college, it's not about like myself. It's not about it's about we and us and about winning games and winning championships. And then you get to professional baseball, and in the minor league level, a lot of people are trying to find themselves. They're trying to do well enough to get promoted to the next level, ultimately trying to get to the big leagues. And so there's a lot less team concept in minor league baseball than college. And for me, that was a difficult transition because I was always about we and us, not me and I. And so that was tough. And then finally, when I did make it to the big leagues, then it's all about we and us again. It's all about winning a championship. And that's a concept that a lot of people that don't play pro ball probably don't see. But in minor league ball, you're trying to get to the next level. You're trying not to get released, trying to play as best as you can. So when you take a loss, you don't take it as hard because you have to be more concerned with how you're doing individually in order to continue to move up the ladder.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. You know, in the minor leagues, that is the goal, is to get to the big leagues, and they're looking at what you're doing performance-wise, and so that makes perfect sense on how the team concept could be lost at the minor league level until you get to the majors for sure.
But let me just put it to you this way. The team that when I got drafted by the White Sox, I went to Hickory, North Carolina, and I got there at the All-Star break. That team ended with the worst record of all the minor league teams in baseball.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, that was a tough one to grasp.
I'll bet that. And I'm a team person as well, so that would bother me a little bit as well. If you moved up quickly though, every year you got to another level, 99, move up to A+, 2000 AA, and 2001 AAA. Then you get called up on June 15th of 2001. How did you find out that you were going to the big leagues?
We had actually finished the game. I believe I actually had a pretty good game, hit a home run, had a couple hits. We won, and Nick Leyva, who has been a big league coach for a very, very long time and manager, was our AAA manager that year. And I was about halfway home from the stadium. I showered and got dressed and left. And about halfway home, I got a phone call from him, and he told me to turn around and come back to the field. And I said, okay, all right, Skip. So I turned around, and I'm driving back to the field, and I was thinking to myself, what'd I do wrong? Like, I didn't think I did anything wrong. So I ended up walking into his office, and he sat me down and told me that I was going to the big leagues.
That had to be a great feeling of accomplishment that you're going up.
It's like the culmination of all the hundreds of thousands of swings and the blood, sweat, and tears, and all the hardships that you've endured over the course of all the games that you've ever played, and to have it culminate in being called up to be able to wear a major league uniform was amazing.
And the very next day or night, you're a pitch hitter against the Cardinals. Are you nervous or excited for that first at bat?
Both.
Okay.
And yeah, I got called up. I went straight to St. Louis. And actual funny story. So the first day that I'm there, I called a couple of the people that I knew from the team that I was close with that had been called up or that I played with earlier in the year in AAA and played in spring training with and stuff like that. And so they told me, hey, be down the lobby at this time and we'll go to the field together. And so they kind of ran me through the unspoken rules of being a Major League Baseball player. Don't let the second bus beat you to the field. Be here early. do all these things. And so I went with them, and we had to go over to the Cardinal side it's at the old Busch Stadium, and to go to their workout facility because we have to lift before the game. So I went to go over there, and I asked the clubby where the gym was, and he said, "Go out, turn left in the hallway, and it's the third door on your right." So I go, "All right." So I go do it, and I count the doors. I open the door, and it wasn't the weight room. It was the training room for the Cardinals locker room. And I opened the door, and right in front of me is Mark McGwire sitting on the table. And I kind of froze, and he looked at me and smiled, and then he said, "Next door down." I went, "Okay." And it went and worked out. But my first at bat, we were getting beat, and Jerry Manuel, our manager, said, "Hey, Roe, grab a bat. You're going to hit second in the ninth inning, or third in the ninth inning." And so the first two guys got out, and the Cardinals happened to bring in their closer to get some work, even though they were beating us like 13-5. And his name was Dave Veers. Throws like 97, 98 with sink. And so the first two guys are out, and it's down to the last out of the game. And then if anybody who's from St. Louis knows that any of those games, the last out of the game, with 2 outs, the entire stadium stands up and starts cheering and clapping and yelling. So I'm already nervous as it is, and I get in the batter's box, and I swear everybody in that stadium could see my legs shaking. But, I just had jelly legs. I ended up popping out to the pitcher to make the last out of the game. And but at least I fought with 2 strikes. I didn't punch out my first at bat.
That's right. And 3 days later, you get your first hit off Tony Coggin from Kansas City. That had to feel good to get that first hit off your back and get forward.
Yeah, and to be honest, of all of my at bats up to that point, I think it was my 6th at bat maybe, and I had faced Tony in college and in the Cape Cod League actually. He pitched at Stanford, and so it was comfortable, and I knew what he threw. I had faced him before, and I hit a line drive down the right field line. I thought about going for 2, but I didn't want to get thrown out at second. My first hit in the big leagues.
And keep the ball, right? Have the ball still.
Absolutely.
After that season, in the off season of 2002, you had a broken left shoulder blade and a rib from a dirt bike. How did the White Sox take that you were injured, and what was your mindset once you knew that you were going to miss the beginning of the season?
Well, the worst part about it was that year in 2002, after a good rookie year, I was supposed to be the starting center fielder, and about 2 weeks before spring training, they signed Kenny Lofton, and so that kind of forced me to the bench, and didn't get off to a great start that year, coming off the bench and pinch hitting quite a bit and doing stuff like that, until at the trade deadline, we traded Kenny to the San Francisco Giants, and I had a chance to play every day the rest of the season. And luckily for me, I didn't have too many at bats at the beginning of the season. I ended up, I think, hitting 287 or something, but I had solidified myself as the starting center fielder for the Chicago White Sox. Well, that off season, I went and did something stupid by breaking my scapula and my shoulder and my ribs. And I had to actually call our general manager, Kenny Williams, at the time. I had to call him to tell him what was going on, and I had to have surgery, and he hung up on me. And
not a good sign.
That was pretty much how I knew he wasn't very happy with me. So the rest of the off season, after my surgery, which I had on November 13th, I was in the gym. Luckily, my trainer is a physical therapist here in Vegas, and one of my best friends to this day, Tim Soder. And I was literally in the gym with him 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, and strengthening. After I healed, strengthening and trying to get ready to go and be ready for camp. And I ended up getting to the point I was probably doing things I shouldn't have been doing. I started swinging the bat about a month and a half before the doctor told me to, just to try to get ready for camp. And so I wasn't 100% healthy when we got there, but I got by. I was instructed by our trainer Herm not to dive for any balls in the outfield until the season starts. And I made it through, and then I started opening day. And playing in the cold in Chicago with that kind of injury was a lot different than playing in Arizona. So it was a lot stiffer, it hurt a lot more. And so I didn't get off to a great start, but once it warmed up, it started going.
Yeah, in 2003, unfortunately, with that tough start, they sent you back down to the minors, but you were there at only 32 games and back up, never looked back. When that word came down that you were going to go down to the minors, change the mindset, get pissed off, going, all right, I'm coming back as soon as I can. How did you take that?
Well, it's a weird dynamic. When you know you're not 100% and it's 30 degrees outside for almost every game you're playing, and you know you're not at your best, and then you start questioning yourself as to, am I ever going to be the same after my accident? And so as the at-bats mounted and wasn't playing well, and you start to see the writing on the wall, and then instead of going out trying to succeed, you start going out trying not to fail. And that was a real learning experience for me. And when I finally did get sent down, and I went down to Charlotte where it was a lot warmer and started playing AAA, I started feeling better. And like I said, I got called back up, like you said, 32 days after, whatever it was. And my first at bat back there actually was in interleague against the Giants. I hit a home run and then took off and never looked back.
I've always said it's always too cold in April in Chicago to be playing baseball.
Yeah, it's not too bad if you're healthy. But when you had total shoulder reconstruction, it's not all that fun.
You're a regular starter in 2004. Aaron, explain to my listeners, how are rest days calculated when you're a regular starter playing every day? Is that something that comes from you, or is that something that comes from the manager?
No, typically it's the manager. And that was the first year that Ozzie Guillen came to Chicago in 04. And, he would come up to me occasionally and say, how are you hanging in there? Like, how are you feeling? And I just tell him I'm good. Like, I don't need a day off. Like, I want to be out there. There was a couple days that year that he physically forced me to take a day off, even though I didn't want to. But it all worked itself out, and I played a lot of games that year, had a good year, and I respect the heck out of Ozzie Guillen because of the way he was as a player's manager and the way he dealt with his players. And he gave us the freedom to let him know if we needed a day off or needed something. And, I just wanted to be the guy that he knew he could count on every day.
Did you start feeling in 2004 with Ozzie coming on board that things were starting to change? Maybe not foreseeing a 2005 World Series championship, but could start to see the shift going in the right direction.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the players that we had on our squad, a lot of us came through the minor leagues together. Mark Burley, Joe Creedy. I mean, we all played together at some point. And then the older guys that were there, we had a great group and a great offense, but we really didn't have the pitching to compete for the championship at the beginning of that season. And through that year, we acquired Jose Contreras, we acquired Freddie Garcia, and then we already had John Garland and Mark Burley, that we all had come through the minor leagues with. And when we got those two pitchers, and towards the end of the season, we started seeing what we could do. I think everybody started believing because Ozzie was a believer. He made everybody else believe. And at the end of that season, I believe as an offense, I want to say we were either first or second in every offensive category in the American League. And our issues came from pitching. And so that offseason after 04, Kenny surprised everybody when he traded Carlos Lee to Milwaukee for Scott Posednik and Vizcaíno, and a left fielder and a reliever. And so we went from being a sit back and wait for the 3-run homer team to a team that could run the bases, steal a base, play good defense, and then obviously we picked up El Duque that offseason as well. And our starting staff was solid. We weren't quite as offensive solid because we lost Maglio Ordonez to the Tigers, but we picked up Jermaine Dye. And so you got a little more athleticism, still a good bat. We were probably upper third of the American League offenses that year, but our pitching was lights out.
Did you start seeing the team gelling then at spring training coming into the 05 season?
Oh, yeah, because after the end of the 04 season, when we finished the season pretty well, and then our new pieces that were gelling, A.J. Brzezinski came on board. We were gelling in spring training, and I think it was fueled by a lot of the media who had picked us to come in fourth in our division. I think that pissed a lot of people off, considering we knew we were a lot better than that. And I think everybody on that squad played with a chip on their shoulder.
And that showed that year. You had a 97% fielding percentage, only 3 years, 388 putouts in the outfielder. It was said that you were one of the clubhouse leaders. Why do you think your peers looked at you as one of the leaders in that clubhouse?
Well, I think being a leader isn't what you say or holding meetings or trying to verbalize being a leader. I think being a leader is going out and showing by the way you play the game and by setting an example for everybody else on the team, to try to play up to that effort, to try to give everything you got every day. And there was no verbalization about who a leader on our team was. It was just about showing up every day and playing. And I like to have a good time and laugh and joke and bring people together in the clubhouse. That's just my personality. Organizing team dinners or like getting together away from the field, laughing and joking and keeping it light until the game starts and then it's time to go.
Your passion for the game definitely came out in the way you played. I mean, you were somebody that not just myself, but a lot of other White Sox fans and baseball fans across the country found out that gave 100% every time you stepped on the field. And if people were leading by example, that had to show through for sure.
Yeah, and I mean the beauty of being on a team like that, and there was very rare instances where anybody had to say anything to anybody else on the team about, hey, we need a better effort than that. And when you play on teams like that team, you very rarely ever have to say it, but as a teammate, not being afraid to go up to somebody who maybe has more years in the big leagues than you or whatever and say, hey, let's go. Like, that's not good enough. And we had a team full of guys like that. I wasn't ever afraid to go to somebody and tell them, hey, I need a better effort out of you than that. That's not good enough. And I think that kind of rubs off on everybody where everybody's held accountable. And that's what being a good team is. Everybody in that clubhouse has to be held accountable.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%. Aaron, what was the feeling then after you start this regular season's over, you're going into the postseason? What was the feeling of the team at that point in time?
Leading up to the postseason, the way that the Indians were playing, and we weren't playing bad. We were playing slightly above 500 baseball through the month of maybe the end of August and September. But they were playing at like a 700 clip. They were just killing it, and they were slowly creeping on us. And then finally, the last series of the season was in Cleveland, but the last game of the series before in Detroit, we realized that if we won, that we were going to clinch. And believe it or not, the day before was when Grady Sizemore lost the fly ball in the sun in the ninth inning against the Royals, and they lost. And that gave us the opportunity to clinch. And we ended up winning the game there that day. And it was kind of a relief because they were only about a game and a half behind us. And we were finishing in Cleveland with a 3-game series. So there was going to be some stress to that. But we ended up clinching. We go to Cleveland, sweep the Indians in 3 straight games. And it just put us on, I don't know what you could call it, a good vibe. I don't know. But everybody was full a full head of steam moving into the playoffs.
Does each bat, whether it's in the ALCS before we get to the World Series or the ALDS, does each bat get in more and more intensified being in the postseason?
You know what? Depends on how you look at it, but I felt as a whole, our team that year, we had and Canerco could tell you too, we always used to joke about it because I want to say that we, at that point, probably won more one-run ball games that season than any team in history.
I think that's true.
All season long, the mantra and like the joke going around the clubhouse after games was like, all right, don't score any more than we need to. Save them up. And when we would win by a run or two or whatever. So we were constantly playing in tough, grind-out games, a lot of walk-off victories, comeback victories. We never felt like we were out of the game. And so having those pressure-filled at-bats, 1 through 9 in the lineup over the course of an entire season, the playoffs didn't feel any different than having to take the last at-bat of the game with 2 outs and a runner on second. If you don't get a hit, we lose. Or if you don't get a hit, we go to extra innings. Like those pressure-filled at-bats, and everybody in our lineup had been put in those positions a lot during the course of that year. The playoff at-bats didn't feel any different. And, if you have enough of those types of at-bats, you stop putting pressure on yourself to have to get a hit or succeed or whatever because you take it as any other at-bat. And I think that carried into the playoffs for our entire team.
You guys go through the entire postseason with only 1 defeat. You sweep the Astros in the World Series in 4 really good different types of ball games. And the last one coming on a 1-0 victory to claim the championship. And the pressure just never seemed to bother you guys. And it makes sense now, listen to you talk about how many one-run games, which I have forgotten about, that you guys had won over the course of the season. So when it came time for those, it was something that you guys had been more familiar with and you didn't think you were going to ever be out of it and had a chance to win these games, which you end up showing that you could win those games. But talk to me about the World Series, how that team felt as a whole in that World Series.
I want to go ahead, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to downplay how good that Houston team was. But after the ALCS, where we played 5 games, and literally only the first game of the series was the one that we lost. And that was the one we thought we were going to win because the Angels had just come off an extra inning victory in Game 5 and had to fly overnight. So we figured they were going to be tired. Well, they came out and beat us. Jose Contreras threw 8 2/3 innings. Neil Koss had a third of an inning. But then we went 4 straight complete games. That's unheard of. That's something that will never be repeated in the history of baseball.
Agree.
In a 5-game series, the bullpen of a team threw 1/3 of an inning.
Yeah, you're not seeing that ever again.
Never. And, from Burley, after Contreras threw, then from Burley to Garland to Freddie, then back to Jose, who threw a complete game. And we rattled off 4 straight wins. Every single guy in our clubhouse, when we were getting ready to play Houston, thought they had no chance.
Feel like you were going to win every game then.
After I'll tell you the moment, at least for me personally, that I felt like there is no way in hell we are not winning the World Series this year, was when El Duque came in out of the bullpen in Game 3 against Boston in Boston and got 3 straight outs with the bases loaded, nobody out.
I would agree. That was a huge turning point for sure.
I remember running off the field when we got out of that, because that was another one-run game. When we got out of that situation, I was running off the field thinking to myself, there's no chance we're going to not win the World Series this year.
That had to be a great feeling, and it ended up culminating with the World Series championship. You finally reached the pinnacle. You're a World Series champion. I mean, you brought something to the city. Chicago hadn't been done in over 80-some years, and still being talked to about this day about all the things that team had accomplished. But I want to kind of jump forward here just a little bit. Less than a month after that World Series win, you get traded to Philadelphia for Jim Thome. How did that feel for you going, I just won a World Series with this team, and now I'm being traded?
I was heartbroken. I'll never forget the irony of how it all happened too, because Joe Creedy and I, our third baseman, had flown to Chicago to do World Series DVD unveiling, and we went to a movie theater, and they had media there, and fans came in. They could buy the tickets and watch the unveiling of it. And before we went into the movie theater, I was doing an interview with some of the reporters in Chicago, and I remember distinctly saying, I don't ever want to play anywhere else. I want to wear this uniform for the rest of my career. Looking back, I think I jinxed myself, but so we do the unveiling, and then the next morning, I got in a cab to go to O'Hare to fly back home to Vegas, and I'm in the back of the cab, and the cab driver has ESPN 1000 on the radio, and Bruce Levine, who's one of the reporters for them, who's covered the White Sox, as you probably know, comes on the radio, and I'm listening to it from the back seat, and he said that there's a trade rumor going around that the White Sox are going to make with the Phillies. And I was like, ooh, I wonder who that is. And then he said, it's rumored to be Jim Thome for Aaron Rowand. And I sat in the back of the cab going, yeah, right. Like, whatever. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And so I flew home, and about 2.5, 3 weeks later, I was actually on my way to play golf with my uncle and my brother-in-law, and I got a phone call, and I saw it was from Kenny, and I just got a pit in my stomach. And so I pulled off the street and parked in the parking lot and answered the phone call, and Kenny told me that he had traded me to Philadelphia for Jim. And it was a very emotional phone call. I think we were both in tears. He didn't want to trade me, but as he told me, he said, even though we won, I got to consistently try to make this team better, and I have an opportunity. So I took it, and I said, I completely understand. Like, I understand the game of baseball. I know how it works. I know the business side of it. And so got off the phone with him and went and played golf, and then actually got a phone call while I was on the golf course from Charlie Manuel, who's going to be my new manager. And as much as I was heartbroken by it, I understood, and went to Philly and played there for a couple of years, and had the privilege of playing for Charlie, who is still one of my closest friends. I look at him as a father figure, and he helped better my career as well.
In Philadelphia, you had what I would call one of the best catches ever. You go full speed in the center field fence on a ball hit by Xavier Nady. You suffered a broken nose and several cuts to your face. You underwent 7 hours of surgery to repair your nose. What do you remember?
My face, I orbital bone too in 3 places.
What do you remember about that catch?
Everything.
You do.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, but it's ironic actually. So Gavin Floyd, who was a rookie on our team, who had ended up playing for the White Sox. Unbelievable talent, young kid, kind of gets in his own way sometimes mentally, but unbelievable ability. And we had played his end of May, and we had played pretty well behind him, and won a lot of games when he pitched. But his big default was he always had one bad inning, and you could see it, that he would get mechanical, and he'd stop pitching, and he'd start worrying about his mechanics and stuff, and he always gave up one big inning. And he wasn't being a rookie, he wasn't one of the starting pitchers who stayed in the clubhouse during batting practice. He was always out in the field, just standing around, didn't want to be sitting in there by himself. So that, believe it or not, before that game, he was standing next to me in center field, and I brought it up to him, and I told him, I said, just pitch, man. Like, stop getting in your own way. That one inning is what's getting you. And so we started the game. It was the top of the first, and he struck out the first 2 guys, and then he walked 3 straight batters. And so now we got bases loaded and 2 outs, and Nady came up, and he hit that ball, and I put my head down, and I started running. I remember thinking to myself, if I catch this ball, we're going to win this game, because this is his big inning, and we're going to get out of here with no run. And I ended up catching the ball. Ended up in the hospital, and watched the rest of the game from the hospital bed at the hospital. and the game ended up getting rained out after 6 innings, and we won 2-0.
So it mattered.
Yeah, it did. And no, that's just how I played. People always ask me, why did you play the way you did? And I said, you know what? Look at it this way. I played baseball with a football mentality.
And you had a toughness because just 16 days later after that, you returned back to the field to play. And unfortunately, a couple months after that, in the same season, you break your ankle on a collision with Chase Utley. Just seemed like you had some bad luck, but that flipped quickly because 2007, you had a breakout year hitting 309, 27 home runs, 89 RBIs, and with the member of the San Francisco Giants now, and were selected to the All-Star game. How did that feel on a personal level of getting to an All-Star game?
Oh, it was a dream come true. Anybody who's ever played at the big league level, or for that matter, the higher minor league level, you don't just get there through talent. You get there through work ethic, through drive. Like, what kind of drive do you have inside you? And I had a very significant drive to try to be the best. And everybody that's ever played in the big leagues wants to be the best. They all have that drive. That's why it's the ultimate competition. But to culminate in 2 World Series championships and then being elected to the All-Star game was a dream come true as an individual. And winning a Gold Glove, because I took pride in playing defense. That drive inside you, when you get rewarded for it, is the ultimate culmination of things.
Going forward, you end up retiring in 2011, and then 2016, you're the manager in the Arizona Fall League for the Glendale Desert Dogs. What's the difference for you from going from being a player to now being a manager?
Well, I had a little bit of transition. After I retired, the White Sox kept asking me to come back and be an instructor in the minor leagues, as whether it be a manager, hitting coach. But I wasn't ready to. I had 2 kids at home. I believe when I got done playing, they were 7 and 10. And I felt like I already missed half of their childhood, and I wanted to be home. And so I kept turning the White Sox down as far as like coming back to coach. And finally, my AA manager when I was in AA, Nick Capra, who's now the third base coach, was the farm director at the time. And he called me and said, I know you don't want to be away from the kids for 7 months, which is what all those other jobs would entail. It'd be just like playing, spring training, full season, everything else. He said, what if I gave you a roving job? And so I kind of couldn't turn it down, because as a rover, being an outfield and base running coordinator or a rover, you basically go to spring training, come home, and then you go out 2 weeks at a time and go see all the teams and work with the players and come home for 2 weeks. And so it was kind of hard to turn down. So I said, okay. And I started going, I did that for a few years. And after my second or third year, Buddy Bell called me and asked me if I would be interested in managing in the fall league. And I said, well, let me call you back. And so I thought about it, and I called him back and told him I'd definitely be interested in doing it. And I took the same approach. I would say I probably took all the good qualities of all the managers that I had, and then took the bad qualities that I didn't appreciate as a player, and took that approach with the players that I had. And being a player's coach, not hibernating in my office, but being around the guys, bringing guys together. It was a lot like being a teammate. Like, you kind of cultivate an attitude and an approach from the players that feed off you. And well, I'll give you an example. Before the first game of that season, I made it mandatory to all the players that we're all going to meet for dinner and at this place in Glendale. And some of the players moaned about it. I said, all right, then don't show up, but you won't be in the lineup tomorrow. Everybody showed up. And when I walked in, I got there just purposely a little bit late. and there were 5 tables because we were represented by 5 different teams, and all the players from every team were sitting at the same table at 5 different tables. All the White Sox over here, the Dodgers over here, the Astros over here, the Cardinals over here, and the Nationals over there. And I said, all right, time out. Chinese fire drill. Everybody get up. Everybody move to a different table, and you can't sit at the same table with another one of your teammates from your organization. So everybody got up and shuffled. Everybody got to know each other. Everybody got familiar with each other. And as the night went, everybody had a good time. And I think that started a kind of a culture between all of those players about what being a team is and how important it is to pull for each other. And to this day, that everybody on that team, they still have a group text that I'm on, and everybody still texts each other and gives each other, crap when something happens, or congratulates somebody when they do something well. And so you just kind of cultivate a kind of an attitude and a tradition with that individual team. And I think being a manager, you have the ability to do that more so than being just a player.
Last question, Aaron, before I let you go. Advice you can give to high school kid out there or somebody going into college that's trying to get to where you were. What kind of advice can you give them?
Well, I can say that I can promise you that there's going to be rough times. There's going to be times where you question yourself. I had it. I had that in college. I had it in minor league ball. I had it in the big leagues after I hurt myself. You're going to go through periods of doubt, but how you come out of that only makes you stronger. And if you're not willing to outwork everybody else, then the chances of you achieving your dream are probably not very good, because there's over 11 million kids in the United States, and 11 million that play baseball. And so you got to keep in the back of your mind that if I'm not willing to put the time and effort in to become the greatest that I can be, and I'm not saying that just if you do that, you're going to make it, because there's luck involved, there's timing involved, but if you're not willing to be the best that you can be, then you're probably not going to have a real good chance of making it, because there are a lot of people out there with a lot less talent than certain individuals that do make it because they worked harder than the guy who had all the ability but figured he was just going to coast his way through. That's
great advice, Aaron. This show has been sponsored by Reflection Bay Golf Club. It's a Jack Nicklaus signature design located in the heart of Lake Las Vegas. Go to reflectionbaygolf.com. It's one of the top 100 courses in America that the public can play. It played host to the Wendy's 3-Tour Challenge from 1998 to 2007. And Aaron, on behalf of me and Eric Dutt, we'd like to invite you out for a round of golf with us when time gets good for everybody and all this virus stuff gets by.
Absolutely, and I'll second that. That course is awesome.
It's a great course. Thanks, Aaron, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Everybody else, I want you to please go subscribe, go to Apple Podcast, review, and rate the show. It helps us grow it. I hope you enjoyed Before the Lights podcast. For show notes, go to our website, beforethelightspod.com, and follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod. Do you want to get your name shouted out on the show? Check that out on the website. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale, and we will talk to you next time.